guys. Welcome to the Biblically Resilient podcast. If you don't know what we do, we just help people stand firm in their faith, their cultural challenges. And thank you so much for tuning in.
All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Biblically Resilient. This is going to be a fun one today. We're going to be talking about the world's broken software and bugs in the system, but really we're talking about mental health. So as always, let me frame today with a couple of scriptures. Romans 12 verse 2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5 says, "We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." And obviously today we're talking about our thoughts, our mental health. A recent Barna study actually said that between the ages of 18 and 35-year-olds, 49% expressed anxiety over important decisions and were afraid to fail. Over 3 in 10 said they often felt sadness or depression or lonely and isolated from others. Mental health is a big issue. And today I'm really excited. We have Sean St. Jean on today, and he's going to be helping us break some of these topics down. Sean, it's great to have you on. We don't go back, but we have a lot of fun, similar connections from the Northwest that we were just talking about. So it's great to have you here, brother. And could you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me, Nate. I really appreciate it. I'm a university professor full-time. That's my day job. And I train therapists for a living, master's level therapists. I teach them how to be counselors, how to work with people at a university called King University in Eastern Tennessee, which is kind of weird because I don't live in Eastern Tennessee. I'm in Vancouver, Canada. So it's I got the 10-foot commute. So I'm very happy about that.
Nice. Excellent. That's a long distance, Tennessee to Canada. I assume you don't fly there very often.
A couple times a year. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Good stuff. All right. So let me jump into the first question for today. In an article on biblical resilience, you talked about how we live in an age of abundance, especially in the US. We have so much stuff. We have so many things that we can devote our time to. We've got hobbies. We have, houses and upgrades and all sorts of stuff going on in our lives. And yet our anxiety levels and our levels of depression are through the roof. Can you help break that down for us? What do you think is going on there? Why such a difference between those two things?
That's such a good question. It speaks to the paradox of modern living. It's interesting. There used to be these "We Are the 99% protests all over the place, and they kind of railed against the 1%. But the truth is that if you live in America, you're probably part of the 1%. If we look at world wealth as a whole, North Americans are just at the top of the pyramid. And if you make more than, 50, 60,000 a year, like you're in like the 0.1% of wealth. And so it's this very strange situation a lot of us find ourselves in where we're extremely affluent. And there's even a term for this sort of malaise that hits people amidst affluence. It's called affluenza. And that's a term from maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago that was a little bit popular for a time. And I think it really aptly describes this paradox of having everything and yet feeling unfulfilled. We've never been in a more peaceful time in world history. We have anesthetic. We don't actually have to feel pain if we don't want to, which has totally changed things like end-of-life care. We mostly used to just watch people suffer and die, and now we can give them anesthetics and they can go peacefully. There's random things like antiperspirant. I mean, how grateful are we for antiperspirant in today's age?
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's so many things happening, and it reminds me of that line from Spider-Man: "With great power comes great responsibility." And I think part of the paradox comes from the fact that we have so much power and influence now as individuals, that it's not lost on us at almost like a body level that we're kind of more responsible.
Mm,
And what I mean is, like, in the olden days, we used to defer to everyone. Um, if we had, if we felt weird, we'd go to the doctor and we'd have to obey the doctor's orders. We deferred to the doctor's authority because back in the day, information was cloistered. You couldn't just know things. If you wanted to be a doctor, you had to go to med school, and you had to be part of that guild almost and accepted among those peers. And so in exchange, doctors had a lot of power to make decisions. And if something went wrong, it was the doctor's fault.
mm,
Nowadays, what do we do? I don't know about you, but I walk in to the doctor's office saying, "Hey, so I think I have dot 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 because these are my symptoms." So I've
yeah.
already come in with a diagnosis, and I want the doctor to be more like my peer, to like talk it through with me. But what that means is, if I misdiagnose myself, whose fault is it? It's actually kind of my fault now. And so because we have this exceptional amount of information and knowledge, things become our fault. And that creates a huge amount of anxiety. Think about, like, legal troubles. Now we're expected to be lawyers. We're expected to be like journalists. We're expected to be IT support. We're expected to be like therapists. Like ministers now are expected to speak like counselors. We're expected to know everything, and the bar's just been raised so high. How could we not feel anxiety by that?
Mm. Wow, I'm feeling anxious listening to you talk about all of that.
Right.
There's a lot there. Yeah, I mean, I'll share for myself. I mean, I know I had a breaking point in the at the end of 2017, and for me, it revolved around lack of sleep,
Mhm.
is what I boiled it down to. But we had just had, we had had a daughter 18 months before, and then we had our
Mhm.
son, and I was on a bad schedule where I was up late for the last feeding and then up early with my daughter. And so I was getting consistently, 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night for a couple of months straight. There was some stuff in the ministry that was difficult, that wasn't going so well. And
Mhm.
I just felt like I broke, and I couldn't, I didn't want to be in the ministry anymore every day. And so I went to a counselor, or I went to my doctor, and she said, "Hey, she diagnosed me with moderate depression and said, you can try and do some naturally healthy things to do this on your own. But if this lasts more than like a month and a half and it doesn't get any better, then you need to go see somebody, and you need to take the next steps here." And,
Mhm.
eventually that's what I wound up doing. And it was eventually what wound up being the case is that I got on medication. And that was like, for me, that was I'd say a night and day. I felt like back up to 85% within a week or two.
Mhm.
Um, and there's more to the story that we might jump into in a bit here, but I definitely felt, especially the lack of sleep, but everything else going on, I felt overwhelmed with everything, all the responsibility, the crying child, in the ear doesn't help at all. And
Mhm.
everything just felt like it was falling down around us. And
Mhm.
so you talk about, in the article, you mentioned John 2:16. It says the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. How much does that tie into? I mean, how do we? I don't even know how you would live in this day and age in the U.S. without having all of these different factors and hits and things coming in all the time. I
It's
mean,
true.
how do we even
Yeah,
tackle this?
it's pay to play. I mean, if you want all of the benefits of having information at your fingertips all the time,
Yeah.
it means that in exchange, you're also subject to corporate America and everything that they want to try to sell you. There's a saying that if the product you're using is free, it means you're the product. And
Yeah.
so, Facebook isn't free.
Right.
Facebook costs billions and billions of dollars. Instagram costs billions and billions of dollars. The reason we can use it for free is because companies pay money to market to us.
Yeah.
We're just the eyeballs. And so I don't think a lot of us are aware of that. The
Mm,
fact that there is a profit motive here, and it's very easy to see the upsides of especially new technologies, and we often have a hard time appreciating the downsides that come down the pipe
yeah.
afterward. Um, and I think one of the main, you speak of the world, and the Bible speaks of the world, and the world really is just kind of shorthand for the operating system that we get programmed with,
Mm,
almost from birth. Our bodies are kind of like the hardware, and
yeah.
then the social structure of the society we live in is kind of like the software.
Mm,
And when you have software telling you, hey, when you have kids, it's going to complete you, it's going to completely fulfill you, it's going to be this magical time, um, and then reality hits. Uh, that's I mean, it's really shocking for a lot of us. I remember before our first son was born, we were in prenatal classes, and there was a lactation consultant saying, "Oh yeah, so when your child's born, he's going to feed like every 2 to 3 hours for maybe 40 minutes at a time." And we're like, "Oh yeah, okay, yep, got it. We got it,"
mhm,
with no idea of what that actually means.
sure.
It means for like months of your life, you're not going to get more than an hour or two of sleep ever, and there are real consequences to that. So
Yeah.
that I mean, it's kind of the difference between knowing something on paper and like experientially knowing something.
Hmm.
And so yeah, that overwhelm, um the world teaches us that you should never have to feel overwhelmed, and yet overwhelm is like God's currency for growing us as Christians.
Mm,
um and so it's amazed that we're shocked by it when it's all throughout the New Testament. It's literally how God grows his people.
now, when you say overwhelm, is there a difference to you? But like, I did a test a couple of summers ago with zero social media. I was getting my phone was trying to get a hold of me 400 times a day
Well,
with no social media on whatsoever. So those numbers just skyrocket if you got social media pings coming on. To the extent where now I get emails 3 times a day, and that's
mhm.
it. to try and get rid of that. So, are you talking about when you say overwhelmed, do you mean like hardship that create helps us to grow and expand, or are you talking about like constant pinging? Because those, to me, those things
Yeah,
seem to be opposites. But
yeah.
what do you?
Well, they're certainly qualitatively different. Um, we're I think about the overwhelm that Paul described to the Corinthians,
Mm,
where he says we despaired even of life. He
yeah.
said we felt pressure far beyond our ability to endure.
Yep.
Um, and I mean, really, what we're talking about is he was almost suicidal. I mean, he was using like suicide type language in his letter to the Corinthians, like
Yeah.
he was done.
Right.
Um, and but the world wants to sell us this bill of goods that says, "Oh, you shouldn't have to feel any of that.
Mm,
You should just live this fulfilled existence. Everything's well lit." And hey, like we're feeding into that a little bit too. We're well lit. I spent half an hour setting up my lighting and my microphone and my background. And is it real? No. If I turn my camera around, you can see all the junk on my desk. So like we inadvertently feed into that too.
yeah.
And I hate to say it, but like the overwhelm you describe of like getting pinged with all the things, like that's what we're being taught to do, to build our ministries, to build our channels and our podcasts. Like we are actually feeding into that machine as well. So it's a really complex problem we find ourselves in.
Yeah. So you should just turn this off right now and
Right? Yeah, just go read your
hit
Bible.
delete. Sorry, guys. Just go back and go read your Bible. Absolutely. Actually, it was funny. I was chatting with somebody before we started this whole podcast, and I said my goal with the podcast is to get people to stop listening to podcasts,
Right?
start digging into the scriptures more. It was a fun
100%.
conversation. I love the end of that scripture that you just referenced, where Paul goes, "This happened so that we might rely not on ourselves but on God." Right?
Yeah.
Which is that's the whole. To me, I go hardship good for us because, well, depending on what we do with it, right? Because if we just go into our own coping mechanisms, that just winds up being a cycle for us.
Hmm.
But if we turn to God, then we can rely on God and become stronger. And then we see more of, like what Paul describes, as he's on the ship and getting shipwrecked and all the stuff that he's going through, which is just absolutely crazy. And you go, okay, he's stronger for God because of this, because he relied on God even more.
Yeah.
Jonah kind of has that same pattern as well.
Hmm.
Okay, you also talked about borrowing other people's maps to navigate life. What does that mean? You mentioned that Satan has a role in that. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, I mean, learning happens in a number of different ways in life. Vicarious learning is a thing. Babies learn from their mothers. Um, that's why there's they do this test. I think it's 9-month-old babies, like the strange test where they like pass the baby away, and they can tell what attachment style a 9-month-old has based on how it reacts
Mm-hmm.
to that stranger. If there's a loud noise, baby doesn't look at the noise. Baby looks at mom, because mom is the interpretive agent in that situation. And so we're herd animals. We're mammals. We live in herds just like every other mammal. And I know that's probably weird maybe to say it that way, but when you're outside looking at those flocks of birds that fly in those beautiful patterns, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you see every once in a while you'll see like goats going in a big circle, and they don't really know where they're going, but they're all going in a big circle around something. Or cows, when they go back to the barn at night, they always line up in the exact same order every single time. They have kind of a pecking order. Humans
Yeah.
are no different. There's scientists that study crowds of humans because we move in very predictable patterns that are almost entirely unconscious to us. So we're just like any other animal in that way. We're very social creatures. And it makes me think of a social theorist named Eric Fromm, who said that parents are the agents of society, meaning they're the original socializers. So we catch so many values unwittingly from our parents, from our childhood. And then in our churches, of course, we become like the people in our churches, for better or worse. Sometimes it's virtuous, and like we think I think about, like, in Genesis, you've got like the line of Seth, and the line of Cain, and like one was righteous, one was wicked, and you could see very obviously how righteousness or wickedness can be passed along socially, and we're no different.
Okay, so you talk about that's a part of Satan's lies to us, and how essentially all those things, and how we listen to other people, those are lies. How does that apply to what you just talked about?
Yeah, well, they can be lies, and I think that's why Paul says don't conform to the pattern of this world. There's a certain pattern of lies that gets adopted by a group, and the thing is, when the whole group believes a lie, it's truth to them. It's
Mm,
just truth, and there's no other way around it. Um, and so we're really called to be discerning. There's a lot of scriptures in the Bible that talk about learning how to discern, how to
mm,
test the spirits, how to be wise and consider people's their words and their way of life and the outcome of their way of life. And Jesus says, "By their fruit you will know them." Um, we're being asked to build some skills within us to figure out what's right and what's wrong, so we can escape that herd.
mm.
And in fact, when you look at prophets, I've heard it said, and I'm not a theologian, by the way. So if you decide to fact check me on anything, that's totally cool. Um, I don't have a theology degree, so I don't enough to be dangerous. But um, you know, what I've heard said is that prophets, they either need to come from outside of the camp to be effective, or they need to go into the wilderness to be consecrated and then
Mm,
brought back. They need that separation. And we see that Jesus was constantly leaving.
mm.
He was leaving the people all the time, and to get away. He went to desolate places, to be by himself and to be with his Father. And I think that's really crucial. But a lot of us, as you say, we're getting pinged 400 times a day. It's almost impossible to be alone now. And so I think just even having a good way to manage like all of the information coming in
Mhm.
is really wise. we have to be really careful about our diets and what we're consuming.
Mm,
Um, Chances are, I mean, if you're scrolling Insta like every day for like half an hour to an hour, your brain is being fed worldliness. It's being fed values of the world. It's being fed lies, and these are lies that speak to our flesh.
hmm
They're either beautiful people, or they're people getting into fights, or they're people gossiping, or they're just all kinds of worldliness being packaged into your phone, so that you can consume it easily. And
Yeah.
just consider what a diet like that's going to do over time.
Yeah. It's funny. I was teaching my 8-year-old son the other day. I was teaching him about algorithms. I said, "Look, did you see that once we watch two of these little short videos, all of them tend to like be the exact same thing?" And he was like, "Oh wow, that's kind of scary." I was like, "Yeah, you don't really. You can only the only way you can control what you're getting fed is by spending a little more or a little less time on something."
Yeah,
It's a crazy world.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, and those algorithms, just to make this point, they're morally neutral. They're servants. They're merely responding to your choice.
yeah.
So if your choices are wicked on social media, it will simply bring you more wicked things. If your choices are righteous on social media, it will bring you more righteous things. It's a non-moral tool, which is why we need to build the capacity within us to discern and to avoid temptation and to resist the devil.
Mm, I love it.
Mhm.
Satan's lies is something that it's all over the scriptures. One of my favorite um, points on the topic is with Jesus and his temptation. We traditionally say there's three temptations. I always say no, there were four temptations, because at the beginning of every single temptation that Satan gives him, he also says, "If you are the Son of Man."
Mm,
And he gets him to second guess, or he's attempting rather to get Jesus to second guess even his identity as the Son of God.
wow.
And even with Jesus, Satan's like, "All right, I'm gonna," and it's not forward either. It's underneath. It's hidden. It's subversive in the way that
Mhm.
it's done, just like a lot of algorithms can be, or our scrolling, or whatever. I was scrolling the other day, and all of a sudden, something messed up came up, and I was like, "What in the world? Like, this is not a part of." But there's always this like attempt to see, hey, every once in a while, are you sure this is what you want to be looking for? Because you might
Mhm.
be interested in this thing over there. We could take you down a different route. So
It's
um,
true.
that's crazy.
Satan is real, and
Yeah.
he doesn't like you very much, and he doesn't want you to be successful. I think he hates God even more. And it's like, I mean, now that you have children, if somebody wanted to hurt you the most, they wouldn't hurt you; they would go after your kids.
Yeah.
And Satan is no different.
Yeah.
He's he is just filled with hatred toward
Mm,
God.
yeah.
And he did that to Jesus. He was sneaky with Jesus. He did the same thing to Eve. We often forget that he told Eve like a truth,
Hmm.
and then but it was like a half truth. And then in the same way that you're mentioning to Jesus, he told Eve this sneaky little secondary lie, because he says, well, for God knows that if you eat this, you'll be like him, knowing good and evil. For God knows, implying like God's holding out on you,
Mm,
like God. So this is like God's universe. He's on top, you're on the bottom.
yeah.
He wants to keep you on the bottom, like you're being oppressed by God. It's
Hmm.
like the ultimate patriarchy. It's like he is only thinking about himself. He's a narcissist, he's power tripping. And just think about what that lie, that subtle implied lie, would have done to Eve's heart.
Mm,
The reason why lies are so awful is because lies are heart damage.
mm,
Satan's goal, the reason he tells lies, is because he's trying to get as many people to turn away from God as possible. That's his only goal. It's all he cares about. He it's like if he hated you, he would want to teach his children to hate you, because he knows how much that would hurt.
mm,
And so he does that with us. And so he will sell us any lie he can to get us to turn away from God. He doesn't actually believe these lies himself. He doesn't care what the lie is. He'll tell you a lie if he thinks it's effective, and if it doesn't work, he'll think of another lie. And it's kind of like Inception, the movie Inception, where you plant
oh
this
yeah.
idea, this little seed, right, and it can grow over decades.
Yeah.
Chances are he's planted seeds in each of our hearts that, you know, they just kind of sit there and they fester and they grow. And he's playing the long game with us because he wants us to die, and he wants to hurt God.
Mm. Wow, that's powerful. Okay, let's break down a major piece of the world's current software.
Yeah.
And that is the idea that everyone's experience is valid. That is, man, that is a popular one today. That, man, if you had an experience, it's, you cannot, that's like the ultimate. You can't touch my experience. How is this, how does this play into everything we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a tough one because we get into the meanings of words and some wordplay a little bit. Um, as a therapist, I've learned how to validate people's experience. And there's a saying, feelings first, facts follow. And what that means is, if somebody comes to me with a problem and they're feeling really deep emotional pain, the worst thing I can do is say to them, "Oh, you don't have to feel that way. No, no, no. Like you're not seeing it right. Like it's just going to shut down the conversation right away." And I wouldn't be a very good therapist if that's what I did. So what I teach my students to do is to listen and to empathically respond to that thing. So like when you tell me, yeah, like I didn't get any sleep, I was like sleep deprived for all this time and it was really, really hard. I'm not going to say, "Oh, Nate, come on. Like just like get over it." Like, would I ever say that as a therapist? Gosh, what an awful thing to do. I'm going to say, "Wow, that sounds like it was really hard." You had a valid experience, meaning your experience, like nobody can tell you that wasn't hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you were there, you lived it.
Yeah.
And so like that's true. Now, you didn't know it at the time, but there were probably some things that could have helped you at that time. Now, if I led with those things, oh, okay, so Nate, like forget all that, forget how you're feeling, just do this to fix a problem. If I said that, it wouldn't be very effective. So that's why facts follow. We validate feelings. Feelings are never wrong. Like if you have a feeling, you have a feeling, and that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the thing on which the feelings are based can be untrue, like it's like the feelings based on a lie.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are some fixes that people just aren't ready to hear yet for whatever reason. I think that's why Jesus at one point asked, "Do you want to be well?" And
Mm.
sometimes we don't always acknowledge the ways in which we're being served by our sickness.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's I think what's happened is there's this sort of counselorification of life now. Like it's like everyone needs to speak like a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that does is it's kind of lionized the personal experience. We're now saying like my personal experience trumps everything else. My identity trumps everything else, and no one can say anything to that. And it's tragic because what it means is you can't really have a dialogue about an issue anymore, because what's at stake is that person's very experience and identity, and those are really high stakes. Um, a good example. This might seem a little random, but so as I said, I teach therapists how to do therapy. And I have an exercise called a fishbowl exercise that I've done for years where at a certain point, every student is going to have to put on their counselor hat and role play a scenario in front of the class for
Mm-hmm.
everyone. And, a lot of master students walk in, they're kind of mid-20s. They've had some successes in life. They've got an undergraduate degree. They come in talking a big game and they sound like to the point where I sometimes feel a little threatened by them because they come out with all this you know all these theories and they sound really polished um and it's like almost like you have nothing to teach me, professor. Like there's nothing for me to learn here. I'm this fully formed human.
Mm.
But what's interesting is during the fishbowl exercise or just before it, people are terrified
Mm.
and people will call in sick. I've even had people drop my program because of the fishbowl exercise. Because what's happening, they've talked a big game and now their skills will actually be on display for everyone. So we'll all see whether or not they have the skills to back up what they're saying. And that's it's like this moment of truth. And I think something like that has happened on a bigger scale in society. We've all had to project this image, especially on social media, of us as these fully formed, like we're like all these perfect marketing images of these fulfilled, enlightened people living our best lives. And but what happens when you're actually having like a crisis, a huge moment of weakness, and you need help? Well, now you got to get down off that huge, you know, stage, and you have to leave the limelight and be a human, a mortal human again. And I think for a lot of us, we've just gone too far up
Hmm.
that ladder to be able to do it. And so it's what it's done is it's led to shallow relationships. It's led to mental health problems. Um, it's been really hard on all of us. Like, okay, think about like the 1930s movie star diva, right? Who, like, we all know what this person was like. They were like, they had servants bringing them things, and their face was everywhere because they were a movie star, and they might have been kind of over dramatic, um and we could all see that this narcissism kind of grew in them because they believed their own PR,
Hmm.
like back in the 1930s. But back then, like, 1 out of 1 million people could have that kind of fame.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can all have that kind of fame.
Yeah.
Now we're all well lit. We all have PR. And guess what that's doing? It's making us all into like these movie stars with all of the moral rot that comes along
Hmm.
with it. It makes it really hard to get help.
Wow, that was powerful. Um, I was having a conversation with someone earlier today. We were talking about church marketing and the best way to try and, use social media and platforms to help people become or come out and then study the Bible and become Christians and all that. And one of the things that stuck with me, because, I created this spiritual survey for people to take, and you take the survey and then it gives you personalized results based on how you score. And then you get into a 15-week email drip campaign, blah, 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 blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. And I was expressing my discouragement at how few people were jumping into the spiritual, like getting them into that spot. And okay, we've tried all this different stuff, and a whole lot of people aren't taking the spiritual test. And one of the things he said stuck out to me. He said, people's stories and vulnerability is what you're really looking for. That's what people can grab onto. That's the type of people, when we tell our personal stories and we get vulnerable, and we kind of, like what you're talking about, when we step off of our own pedestals and get real and go, this is the truth. Here's the raw and real me, and this is the experience I've had, and here's how God has transformed me. That's what people are really looking for. Not, they're getting marketed to so many times within a given day. And
Yeah.
again, it boils down to, okay, Jesus was real. The disciples were real. They were vulnerable. Even Paul, I love Paul's journey, and I'm the worst of sinners is where he gets to eventually. And there is an aspect of this where I think what you're saying is totally right. We're trying to be movie stars in a world where everyone's competing to be the best movie star and put on the best
Mm-hmm.
face and put on the best mask. And here's the right lighting and the right microphone and the right, everything in the world. We're aiming for the wrong type of perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being perfect in love with Jesus, we're trying to be perfect in all these things that at the end of the day will burn and don't matter and will disappear.
Yeah.
Wow, amen. That
Mm-hmm.
was a great point. I appreciate that. Okay, so you also talk about some of the lies. So some lies that we were told by the rest of society they damage us from the outside in and try to get us to doubt things. And then there's the lies that we tell ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do those, and maybe Satan's definitely still involved in that process, potentially some degree, but we tell ourselves these lies. So one of them I was thinking about for, like singles or campus students is the fact, maybe someone's going, the fact that I don't have a relationship is proof that I'm unlovable.
Mm-hmm.
How is that an invalid thing for somebody? How can they get out of that type of a mindset?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a lot of moving pieces to this. We talk about software of the world. Our bodies are really the hardware. And so it helps to take a step back and consider that God created our bodies to survive on the earth. And they do a pretty good job, actually. Humans can survive. If you think about the fact that humans have populated pretty much every like spot on the planet, whether it's jungles of Africa or the northern Arctic, the Inuit people, we're pretty remarkable. We have these remarkable bodies that can adapt, but our
Mhm.
bodies are always manipulating us to give them what they need to survive. It's kind of like I've got this glass of water here. If when you're really thirsty, how does that feel? Is that a good feeling?
No, not initially.
No, no, it's an awful feeling, right? But like, you take a sip of water or a gulp of water, how does that feel?
Like better than not thirsty.
Right. It just feels so good, right?
Yeah.
So when we meet a need of our body, if our bodies manipulate us into giving us like a dopamine hit, and it does this in 1,000 ways. And it reminds me of the scripture that says, no one can say God is tempting me, but it's our own evil desires that cause us to be dragged away and enticed.
Right.
And I take us straight back to Eve. Eve, she wanted the fruit. It says, it was pleasing to the eye and desirable for gaining wisdom. So she had her own almost bodily desire for it. But what she needed was the justifying lie. And that's what Satan handed her. Now, in the same way, like if we think about like this lie, oh, I'm unlovable, I'll never find a girlfriend, I'll never find a wife. Think about like the biological roots of that fear. Like from the body's perspective, our bodies want to pass on their genes, right? The flesh wants to continue into the future, which means, hey, we need to procreate. And so the idea of not being able to find a mate to procreate with, that's a disaster from the body's perspective. And so the body's going to actually kick out all kinds of weird thoughts too, um, to try to motivate you to claim that prize that the body wants. Like I'm just thinking about like let's take that thought down the rabbit hole. You know, I'm part of a small church. There don't seem to be any women in the church here that like me. Um, maybe I'm totally unlovable, but maybe it's not me. Maybe it's the church's fault. Maybe I need to go outside the church to find someone.
Mhm.
You could kind of see how the lies take you down this path, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the body, when you know what the body wants, which is just to procreate, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's the body will tell you any kind of info it needs to. I don't even know if I would call it a lie, but it would tell you whatever it needs to tell you to make you do the thing it wants you to do.
Hmm.
And so this is, I mean, and you could do your own study on it, but the flesh is like a huge part of the New Testament. And I
Yeah.
don't think as a church we've spoken enough about what Paul means when he talks about the flesh. We have two wills living inside us. We have our innermost being, as Paul says in Romans 7, that delights in God's law. It's a
Mhm.
part of us that's going to be with God forever in heaven. But then we have our flesh, which is just like an aspect of our bodies. And Jesus said flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. So our bodies aren't destined for heaven. They're destined to be swapped out somehow. I don't quite understand the theology behind that, um, but our bodies are designed for the earth, for earthly things. And so what happens is we can get really mixed up between what our innermost being desires, which is God, and what our flesh desires, which is why like Galatians 5:19 is such a powerful passage, not just helping non-Christians become Christians. It actually wasn't written to non-Christians.
No, it
It was
wasn't.
written to disciples who had been
Yeah.
disciples for a long time. And I think even the translation we use did a disservice to it. The sinful nature I think is a little bit abstract, but the flesh is a much better word. So I guess where am I going with this? So this guy, if I was counseling him, I would want to get to the root of like where that lie is coming from. and we would probably find a history of woundedness. There might have been previous rejection. Um, there's all kinds of places where this lie could come up, but eventually, after empathizing and validating his experience, um, I, as a therapist, it would be my job to gently begin undermining that lie and asking him to question that belief to see if it's true. Because what happens often is when you believe a lie, it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and confirmation bias kicks in, and all you can see are facts and things that confirm your worldview to be true. And so if you're a single person, you might stop putting yourself out there. You might stop going on encouragement dates with women in the church just to build friendships, because like, what's the point? Because I'm unlovable and I'm destined to be alone. So it's really important that we tackle this. And what's interesting though is when we boil all of these lies down, what I found is that after counseling thousands of people, almost every single lie boils down to some version of I am worthless, I am useless, I don't deserve to be here. There's some common core at the center that I find very powerful.
I love it. We're going to talk more about the solution in the next episode. So this has been incredible so far. I can't wait to see how the solution develops. And man, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for jumping on with us. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. If you guys felt like it challenged or convicted you, then I definitely want to encourage you to go check out our website, biblicallyresilient.com. Please don't forget to just walk it out, live it out, and definitely leave a review if you can. Thank you.